Thank you to everyone for taking the time out of your day today to join us. We've got a really interesting discussion today geared around future-proofing your leaders. So I'm Glenn McDermott. I'm from the Lighthouse Group, and no doubt you can see many of my colleagues on the call today with our really cool backgrounds there that'll help you to identify who those individuals are. And what, as promised, we'd like to talk about today is a couple of different topics that really pertain to how do you go about future-proofing your leaders or the leaders within your organization. And there's a couple of different things that we'll talk about as part of today's agenda. So we'll look at, as we progress over to the next slide, we'll look at what are the fundamental skills that leaders need for now and into the future. We'll look at helping you and your leaders to deliver some of those outstanding results that'll come as the workplace continues to evolve, and we deal with the I guess the extended fallout of the coronavirus and all of the imposition that we've needed to entail and address. And we'll look at what is some of the ways that we can explore what we're doing within our existing framework and with our existing offering to really help leaders evolve and grow their own skill sets to really help future-proof your organization for leaders at all levels. So not just our top leaders and often our top talent where many of us are orienting our focus towards, but then also at the same time really ensuring that we're setting up the next group of leaders as well too. Because we know that leaders are always under the microscope. People are always evaluating the decisions that they make, and the best agile leaders are the ones that are definitely able they stand out from the crowd by making great decisions and adopting practices that really support their own workforce and ultimately encourage their teams to continually develop. So COVID-19's wreaked absolute havoc on the old command and conquer style of leadership for good measure. And at the same time, it's also helping people to let go of that control that they once had in time. So fundamentally, what the pandemic has taught us is that both employees and employers need to really be adaptable and agile to trends within the world, and really look to future-proof yourselves as organizations and as team members or employees against the next pandemic or the next massive shift in the landscape, whether that be AI, whether that be a different piece of technology that ultimately changes the business model that you've been accustomed to. So as we kind of take that path to recovery into a normalized working environment with work from home and 4-day weeks and all of those other complexities thrown into the mix, there's a number of leadership challenges that are really important for us to be thinking about to help us future-proof our organizations. And we'll know that those that are able to future-proof and be adaptable to those various trends and things like that come up will be the successful businesses. And to future-proof our organization, we need to really be thinking about what does that mean for us? And how do I ensure that I'm not overly wedded to the status quo when we know that things are going to be thrown at us? Skills are going to change, and how we respond to some of those skills is going to change. So as we get into the discussion today, I really wanted to share with everybody a couple of key statistics on the next slide that for some will be a little new to them, whereas for others it'll be a bit of a reaffirmation or affirmation of what you already had known. So the piece I want to highlight here for you is that since 2017, big pardon, since 2015, 25% of the skills that leaders need has already changed. And by 2027, this number is expected to double. So what that ultimately says to us is that 50% of the skills that we'll need will have changed between 2015 and 2027. That's only 15 years. What an evolution of skill sets that is for leaders across all industries and for team members across all businesses. So in saying that as well, a survey of L&D pros conducted by LinkedIn in 2023 highlighted that 89% of L&D pros agree that the skills needed to help navigate the future of work will ultimately change. That is an astronomical amount, near 90%, and an already a pivot of 50% or 180-degree turn from 2015 to 2027. If we accelerate and fast forward that's only, you're looking in the vicinity of 12 years, a further 12 years to that. That's a full shift turnaround. So what I'd like to do is that based on those numbers, and certainly when I read them for the first time, they're certainly very enlightening and something that I'd not really thought about previously. I'd ask you to enter into the chat. Is that a surprise to you? So a simple yes or a no. Is that a surprise that it's shifted as much as it has? and the projected shift to reach 50% by 2027. All you need to do is, if you're unfamiliar with Teams, at the very top of your screen, you'll have a chat icon, which looks very similar to your phone. If you click on that once, it'll highlight a box of meeting chat on the right-hand side, either a simple yes or a no, for whether you're surprised by that at all. Got a couple of no's already. Thank you to Christy and to Andrew for the no's. A little surprise there, Joan. Thank you for your responses. Mark, no. Saritha, that's a no. And a not really. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Aaron, for your insights there. Absolutely. COVID was pretty massive. It's really interesting to see what a pivot that's been already. I'm seeing a numbers come through of continued no in some spaces. All right, I think we're getting a little bit of a trend here. So often no for a number of these, but in some pockets there it's a little surprising. I certainly know my perspective from the first instance was around. I was surprised it was that great a shift. So at the same time, no, I wasn't really surprised that there was a shift, but the magnitude of that was certainly the piece that probably surprised me the most. So if that's the shift that ultimately that we're able to see, we really need to be thinking about how are we equipping leaders at all levels of our organizations to have the right skills that they need to be successful. So onto the next slide is what we're able to see here. And in this is an illustration by from Simon Sinek, as you can see there on screen. This is when we take the lens of a changing landscape and we need to revisit how we're ultimately providing leadership offering for team members in our organization. We want to be thinking about, and often we orient ourselves towards the key groups that we have within our organization. And the key group can often be that frontline leaders, and we have that orientation towards equipping them with the skills that are required, or non-management persons, that emerging talent. And we can often focus our skill sets and our efforts and resources towards our senior managers or our top talent. So myself, having just stepped out of a number of corporate roles, my orientation was often toward that top talent cohort and ensuring that they were, from a retention side of things, we certainly look to always be engaged and developing and growing, because if they weren't working towards their career objectives and building out skill sets to aid them into the future, their retention risks. So as we're looking to do that, we're looking to build out those particular groups, and then we have that middle level of manager, those ones that are stuck smack bang in the center, and the ones that often we forget about. So as people are promoted from frontline leaders into that middle manager, no one's teaching them some of the essentials. So often we're not focusing on giving that middle level of leader listening skills. We're not focused on teaching them communication, coaching skills, delegation, conflict, and the list goes on. And when the overlay starts to come into that, there's a number of different things. They're really familiar with the day-to-day work that people typically do and that they now oversee, but they often don't have the experience of guiding that work or translating situations that they're not as familiar with into agreed plans and structures and way forward. So what it says to us is that if we're lacking training for that particular area, that can affect ultimately your leadership bench strength, your ability for retention, because we know already that leaders have significant effect into the employee life cycle. And it's also a situation in which the effect that leaders have directly onto their team members has a direct correlation with both employee engagement and retention. So what becomes even more challenging for middle managers is we throw into the mix 24-hour connectivity and smartphones. Are you always connected to your role? Working from home for new leaders and also for middle managers where they're not as familiar with that can pose problems and challenges. A hybrid working environment or generational differences. Throw into that AI, throw into that 4-day work weeks, and ultimately things can get really, really difficult for leaders at all levels. And we assume that leaders, those senior managers, are pretty well versed and quite agile and adaptable. We assume that leaders in the middle management have some of those particular skills, but often we're not focusing on the development of that group. So one thing that we hear at the Lighthouse Group is that leaders are sometimes, too busy to attend training, or training's not a focus right now. We need to be really, really mindful of where and how that has effect on the employee life cycle to really link back into both future proofing your bench strength and the skills of your leaders, as well as the impact on engagement that it has for your existing team. So flicking over to the next slide, what we're able to see here in the leadership in the employee life cycle is that the development stage of the employee life cycle is really, really critical to how you're future-proofing and future-proofing leaders within your organization. It's that balance between what are the skills and attributes and toolkits that you want leaders to have both now and then into the future. Uh, we know that the impact of development in and from an employee's perspective links to turnover, engagement, leadership bench strength, and capability. And you can see on screen a quote from WNS Global Services: "Is that career development has a direct correlation into their EVP, and learning is a key business metric." On the other hand, we know that people leave managers, not companies. So what that does is, for me, is it really highlights the role that managers play in developing and maintaining engagement of team members, and knowing that leaders have the power to create a really engagement-rich workplace for team members. And conversely, it also can have a direct link into team members feeling undervalued or dissatisfied with their career growth opportunities. And those career growth opportunities ultimately means future-proofing their own skill sets and their ability to build the skills required for their next role. So we as L&D and HR pros can create all the development strategies and engagement plans that we want, but unless we have effective leaders at each level of that pyramid that had shown on the previous slide, at senior, middle, and emerging leader level, if they're not skilled to help you execute those plans, often they can fall away at that second level of leadership divide, that imaginary brick wall of your C-suite's engaged, your next level of leaders engaged, and then it hits the wall, and the penetration of communication stops. So people want their leaders to help them develop. They want them to help have the skills for capabilities for both now and in the future. And having skilled leaders is really, really important, because the impact that those leaders have to help you future-proof your organization, it's a continued challenge. And some organizations, people are time poor, as I said. It's not a priority. Let's do a quick poll and let's see, from your perspective, where are you focusing your time as an organization, and what leadership training do you have to offer out your team members? So think about, irrespective of level of leadership, do you provide training for all leaders at all levels within your enterprise? So the wonders of Teams will kick into effect in just a moment, and you'll have a poll pop up right now. It'll come up in the chat, I believe it is. So, do you provide leadership training for leaders at all levels? Let's give everyone a moment to have a bit of a think about that one. Wow, that's really, really telling. That's so we can see here is that for providing leadership training for all levels of leaders, we've got we've got a suite of programs at 10%. So that sounds like a really great learning organization. Some, but we'd like more, for 56% of those that have made a contribution to the discussion. And there's a little, so only selected groups at 33%. So wow, I think that really says a lot in terms of getting access to leadership training, and the impact that can have across varying levels of leadership is a really interesting piece. Pete, I know we've had some very recent discussions. So Pete, managing director of the Lighthouse Group, I know we've been talking about this topic at length in the last couple of days. Is there any surprises in terms of those results that presents for yourself then?
Well, I think there's a strong emphasis at the moment on leadership development. A lot of organisations we're talking to are wanting to do it at scale, actually, because a lot hasn't been done for a number of years, running up to COVID, through COVID, and recognising that they need to do it. So I think the general sort of response there is that, there's some, I think many now are really trying to focus on where's the critical audience that we need to really provide for, and what is the specific thing that they need now. And that might have been a bit different. And I think from your research figures before, that's obviously showing up too, that the nature of what is needed now is different. So that's what I'm seeing. But I think there's still the basics of the tools, the practical nature of leading people and leading teams is more important than ever. I mean, I've just done an analysis of a whole lot of senior managers that have been new to an organisation where we've done a 360, and teamwork, focus, and prioritisation and self-management were top three. In terms of what the best people were high in. And so it still shows that in this environment, you've got to manage yourself well, you've got to build a team culture, and you need to know where to play to add the most value. And I think that was interesting to me, because I think a lot of organisations are recognising the need to focus in on some of those areas as well.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's certainly been echoed from a couple of comments in the chat as well too, of how that's really taking effect in a number of organisations. But Aaron shared it's definitely the middle managers being the primary focus around empowerment and autonomy, and yeah, it's a really difficult spot to be those middle managers. You're not quite part of that directioneering team, but at the same time as well too, the elevation is there, and your role is to really take that strategic element from some of your senior leaders and help translate that into actionable pieces, and that can be a really key challenge. And I think certainly that comment rings true for me certainly from my corporate experiences up until a couple of months ago. That's something that definitely is a real challenge for a number of different leaders. So yeah, really great shout out there, Aaron. And Suzanne's comment here as well too of bespoke requirements depending on the role, with an emphasis around experience and skills of the future and D&I. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Couldn't agree further. I think that as certainly in industries where they're very wedded to only experiences within industry, that can become really prevalent. I know I, for one, have applied across the journey for roles in the retail sector, and the number of times that I've been told that I don't have retail experience, that I'm not a suitable candidate for a particular position, I think really highlights that, Suzanne. I think that's something that really does come to the fore in a number of different ways. All right. So what we all can recognize, and we all absolutely know, that it's absolutely critical to have development, and it's an essential ingredient for not only from an EVP side of things, but to, as I said, really future-proof your own leadership within your organization. Making sure that you've got leaders that can evolve their skills and that want to evolve their skills is absolutely super important. So everyone knows then how important development is, and LinkedIn's 2023 learning report really confirmed a lot of these views and motivations for development as part of their APAC research and study. So across the globe and within our region, people crave and seek out opportunities for career progress. So that comes in terms of motivations, and what those motivations are is essentially about how do I continually be working towards progressing my own career and my own career goals, building the skills that I need to equip me for a more senior or influential role into the future, staying connected into our field. And we see a lot of that in terms of things like CPA points and CPA roles and that type of thing to maintain currency. And we see updates, especially around labor law changes and things like that in industrial relations forums. And often respondents to the LinkedIn survey highlighted if they had more time to consume personalized learning for interests that relate to them specifically, and also for their specific career goals, which it really starts to give some balance in between what are those two areas that the team members are looking to consume, one, but then also to pursue. So for us as curriculum influencers, we can really help meet some of these drivers and help to align business critical skills to some of the career goals that team members have, to really help them thrive and set themselves up for that next career step. So let's look a little bit further at some of the data.
So I just, before we go to the next page, just connecting a couple of dots at, this number 3, number 4, more time and personalized learning. It really goes back to kind of some of the core skills that Pete was describing. So it's going to be impossible for us to have programs to meet every need for every person at every time, because the skill sets are too diverse and people have too much individual requirements. So it coming back to, as the people leader of a group of individuals, how do we understand what motivates our people, what they require by way of new skills, and how do we help them navigate their own intrinsic motivation to learn, and how do we equip them to learn and get beyond sort of, we just have to wait for HR to give us another program, really it needs to become part of our leadership expectation that I am here to help provide growth for the people on my team. And I think it's kind of setting that expectation for people leaders and also giving them the skills to then have the conversation, guide people towards the things they need to learn.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think absolutely you'll see that's and a number of organizations are doing that really, really well by equipping leaders with not only the requirement to have career and development discussions, but really thinking about what's that practicable piece and not only being programmatic based. So what are those skills? What are those experiences? What is those knowledge and attributes that are required for that next, whether it be ascension or sideways step for individuals to really look to pursue? And certainly one of the shifts that I'm seeing it would be around making sure that leaders understand that as a process and are helping to carve out those opportunities for team members. So where it might be great to develop particular skill sets, and we'll see in just a moment onto the next slide about what some of the most popular skills that are in demand at the moment across our region, is that one way to develop project leadership and project management skills, as an example, may be following that 3E methodology of education, experience, and exposure. Really being mindful of that as leaders to help future-proof your organization is a way forward for us to see. And these are all classic areas in which that we're seeing a really strong demand. And certainly this data and information comes from. These are the skills that the evolving workplace is calling out. So each of these skills that have been highlighted here ultimately come from job ads, and as well as the skill sets of professionals that received a job offer during 2023. And in addition to that, for people that were directly approached from recruitment firms to say, are they in possession of these particular skill sets, to highlight the value that they're having within the employment market. So really, really tangible piece here is it, and how that can link back into that 3E approach for us, is that we can see that management and communication remains really, really consistent. So I'm not going to read out each of those skills that have been identified there, but one opportunity for us to get your feedback in the chat here, and this is something that I'm really interested in. What are the 3 needs that you see from your organization's perspective? Are they included within these 10 items? So jumping into the chat, of those 10 items, which ones are you focused on as well as part of the development of your team members? So I'm looking to open up the chat there. Is there a priority for your organization? Is it management, communication, and sales? Is it research, leadership, and project management? We'd really be interested to see where the points of connectivity are across the organizations. So thanks, Andrew, for your perspective in customer service. Aaron for leadership, teamwork, and communication. Leadership, communication, sales, all part of those leadership elements. Yeah, absolutely. Great call out. Data and digital decision making. Oh wow, yeah, that's such an interesting topic about how that relates for sure. Sales, leadership, and communications. David's got sales, communication, and leadership. Yeah, some consistency is really coming through. It's a really interesting piece in terms of these are the most in demand. And if we step back away from it and look at that skill set objectively, it really thinks or really identifies for us as leaders as some of these are really baseline and fundamental skill sets, and just how important it is to really get those foundational leadership strengths really well developed before we can build some of those higher end skill sets to help build out leading self and change management. Yeah, absolutely, especially as organizations change and transformational change. Anyone that's read The Age recently, or any publication for that matter, talks about in the business section, organizations consistently transforming and evolving to the market needs. And leadership and sales and communication. Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a few really, really strong points of alignment there. And I think, LinkedIn study has really helped us pull together all of these areas that people are continually looking for within organizations. So as that demand is built within the broader marketplace, we need to be really mindful of leaders, is that how are we embedding these skills into our developmental offering? Being mindful that with unemployment low, inflation high, ultimately, and the demand for talent stronger than ever. It really amplifies what we're doing to help develop our people in the right way, because that competition is really strong. So the number one way organizations are improving their retention is by providing those learning opportunities, which has that direct link in which Eric was mentioned earlier on about, if I develop and maintain my own existing talent, the less likeliness that they'll leave. Increase of bench strength of leadership in your organization, as well as the ability for those leaders to help build out your talent pool continually. Because if these individuals leave because there's strong demand for their skills, it can really dilute your own talent pool and potentially provides leadership gaps across your organization, which clearly impacts your ability to hit some of those objectives. So that's the needs for now. And that's based on real data that LinkedIn's provided as well. So they're all critical leadership skills that have been called out there. But what about some of the skills for the future? And we'll take a moment to have a bit of a chat about the next page in just a moment and use some breakouts here. Let's look at what futurist Jack Aldrich has to say about what are the future leadership skills. So Jack Aldrich ultimately comes out and defines a future-proof leader as someone who takes the time to become aware of how fast the world is changing, and they're aware of trends that might affect their business, and has plans in place to address some of those trends should they eventuate. So that being said, there's also a grave danger in this instance that leaders assume that the current state of the world won't evolve, and maintaining the status quo is ultimately the only course of action for them and their organization. And let's face it, we all know about Kodak, and we all know about Blockbuster, and we all know about how those stories ultimately conclude. So for us as leaders, it's really important to know is that future-proofing your leaders is about really ensuring that they have those baseline leadership essential skills in place to build that solid foundation and help them develop as leaders. So that's things that we'd all identified in the previous slide and started in the chat. The criticality of feedback, delegation, goal setting, coaching, and self-awareness. And I think to further develop that particular thought and really see where that's taking a lot of prevalence is Mark. I know you've had a couple of conversations with a range of different organisations, and that in the last couple of days, as we sit 3 feet from one another, is that often, how much are you seeing that come through in the conversations that you're having and taking place with leaders across the clients that you deal with?
Yeah, I think it's right on the money, Glenn. There's a couple of things that are interesting looking back at some of that LinkedIn research, that on one side, people haven't got the time, but what they're also getting is they're getting a lot more encouragement and motivation to lean into e-learning, because that helps increase the amount of time that they've got available. But the paradox there is it's very difficult to learn leadership through a medium that typically is good for technical leadership. And it's also good for management because you've got task orientation. But one of the challenges is being able to make sure that the leadership element is being supported by sufficient opportunities to be able to build community as leaders, and also be able to share and learn from each other as leaders, because there are a few people in an organisation that have the context the same as all of the leaders that are actually in that business. So it creates a great opportunity to be able to unlock it. So I think the principles of leadership are still very significant and prominent. In terms of these specific skills, yeah, we're seeing critical thinking as being a particularly significant skill to be able to invest in, because it's providing the opportunity to be able to equip leaders to be able to work in a more complex type of environment. So that's probably one of them we're seeing. I think emotional intelligence as well, because that's creating the opportunity to be able to get that sort of discretionary effort created and motivated within teams, which is required as part of leadership today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mark. That's a really good insight. I think it's nice to validate that a number of organisations are seeing the similar type of complexities and things come to the fore as well too. And the research that Jack Aldrich has done here about that future proofing is really super dependent on having those leadership essentials in place. And when we talk about something like critical thinking, your ability to have strong communication skills leverages into that, because for a leader to be able to demonstrate critical thinking, you need to test your assumptions using concrete evidence. You need to be comfortable to see things play out in your mind and test and share those and validate some of those decisions with others in your organizations without necessarily having all of the facts. And your ability to create that case in your own mind as a leader and to be able to share that becomes a really important skill set to be able to have. So critical thinking is absolutely there. With such vast amount of information out there in the ether, having sometimes limited information and being required to make a decision becomes really essential skill set. In terms of emotional intelligence, leaders need to build and support the culture of collaboration and bringing together experts with different skill sets and helping them work together. I'm sure everyone's been part of a team where it might be something where you've got your accountant in there and you've got your engineer in there and you've got your HR person, and each individual orients towards their own skill sets. And it can be sometimes a challenging working team to come together. But when you're working part of a really great team and everyone's able to harness the pieces that they bring and understand some of the variables and how decisions can be made and how to utilize some of those pieces, it's really great to be part of that team when everyone knows that they can be harnessed and their skills used to really unleash opportunities for an organization. I think the emotional intelligence piece that Jack has called out in this instance is really pretty straightforward. I think as people are evolving, and we know that I guess that environment where we need to support people and not knowing what's going on within their lives. And I think we certainly saw that across the last 3 years, but through COVID-19, is we all have our screens up in the background, but you don't know there's 2 screaming kids in the background going absolutely bananas. And that emotional intelligence to come through and really demonstrate some of that empathy as well too for what people are experiencing, and helping to share your own skills and knowledge across teams and really understand what individuals are going through becomes really important. I think something like tech savviness becomes a really interesting piece as well too. We've all no doubt seen so many pieces on AI and the effect in which that technology is certainly having within organizations, and taking away maybe some of the tasks that were typically done by an individual in the past, and how you're utilizing tech savviness as part of that. And I think the one that always rings true in my mind is, and it goes all the way back to Henry Ford, is that telling the if I delivered what they wanted, I would have given them extra horses rather than developing the car itself. So using that technological based approach to save to solve the problem of transportation becomes really interesting piece. Then the last one here is around that agility piece, and Jack gives a really I guess a really tight or a really tiny definition around agility in itself. But agility is, I guess, into the way that he describes it, is it's that ability to flex when things aren't going wrong and ultimately fail fast. And I know we use that terminology often, is that how do you fail fast and move on? That agility is to not be overly wedded to one particular approach, and being, in a way, I guess, that emotional intelligence, and recognize that hanging on to a particular pathway or plan when it's not working, that ability really does show up in a number of different ways, which is really interesting. So what I'll ask everyone to do for a piece of interactivity here, is there any one that you're focused on as part of your organization? Oh, we just had a little techo glitch there. So to deliver ultimately that change of focus in terms of skill sets for both future proofing and existing skill sets that are in demand, LinkedIn's called out that there's 4 key courses of action that organizations can take to really help you focus your areas of learning and development to get the most out of your investment, one, and to future proof your leaders as part of that particular approach. So we all know if you're not going forward and developing your skills as leaders, you're actually going backward. So let's use this as an opportunity to benchmark. And in the breakout rooms, we'll get everyone to have a discussion and share what you're doing in relation to one or any of these particular points, one or all of them. Ask questions about what some different organizations are doing, what's working, maybe what you can do, and learn and bench strength from one another. We've got the team from Lighthouse here that'll help facilitate the conversation here. But let's take about 15 minutes, and we'll look to explore what are you doing in these top 4 focus areas for learning and development. Is it aligning your leadership programs to business goals? if your organization is talking about transformation, do you have a big program of works in terms of project management, agility, and transformation or digital skills? Is your organization focusing on upskilling employees in one particular area? Is there a skill set that you're overly focused on because of the nature of your organization evolving and shifting? Maybe how you're creating a culture of learning from that retention side of things, and where your organization has been orienting towards, we don't have time as a business for learning, it's not a priority for us right now. Maybe how are you trying to move the dial in that space and what you're looking to do in your organization, and are there opportunities to learn from others? And then finally, how are you looking to link learning and development opportunities into improving your employee retention? We know that inflation's high. We know that the demand for talent is really, really strong. We know that interest rates have been booming and absolutely playing havoc on the household budgets. So the demand for even a meager improvement in salary can have a big impact in terms of the turnover within your organization. Let's use the wonder and the wizardry of teams at the moment. We're going to jump into some groups. We'll share those topics into the chat as well too, but have a talk about some of those. Hopefully there's some great learning opportunities for what you can do to really double down and future-proof some of your leaders. And we'll come back, and the team from Lighthouse will help share some of those perspectives from a group learning perspective, and we will see you in 15. Apologies if I'm speaking really, really fast as well. I'm naturally a fast talker, but I have slowed it down. Everyone from Lighthouse is laughing at me right now because they know how fast I talk. And we should all be moving in 10 seconds.
But
Welcome back, everyone. Hopefully technology has worked and we're all back in the main grouping. Doesn't look
Yes.
like we've lost too many folks, which is great. I know
Christy was just finishing up her point, but I got it, Christy. Don't worry.
good form. Lovely. All right, we just in the interest of time and knowing that we've got a couple of little pieces to look to close out today's discussion, we might just do a quick sample set. So, Eric, if you wouldn't mind sharing, I guess maybe one key insight from the discussion within your group, and what was that, and something that hopefully the balance of the team might be able to learn from.
Boy, lots to choose from. I will choose. So Christie's in an organization that's growing quite rapidly, and they've been quite intentional about not just developing their leaders, but also at the same time, almost in that same motion, developing the teams that work for them. So there's a bit of design there. There's a bit of intentionality there. And then her focus on filling each person's bucket. So there's that individual nature of, what Mark needs as opposed to what Susie needs is different. So it's the individuality as well.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, that's really great. I think that leans back into some of those key LinkedIn points about saying what does the individual interests and then also career goals. I think that's a really, really nice piece of alignment there from a future proofing perspective. Peter, how about yourself? I'm sure you were moderating one of the groups. Any key themes or one key point that you'd like to share with the balance of the group?
I had a great conversation with Joan and with Aaron. We were centering in on upskilling and particularly around how do you give the basics to middle managers. And it was centering around communication a lot, like being really clear with expectations on what good looks like, being really transparent or helping them be very transparent in their communication, but also then building psychological safety so people are okay to speak up to communicate what they want. So that really strong emphasis on communication was really the centre of our conversation, and both Aaron and Joan had some great, references in their own organisations about what they're trying to do.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Really great share as well too. And I think we'll see where that that communication as a skill from 2023's in-demand piece comes to the fore. But then also when we start to share the next slide, if we could do that, please, Jenna, to share where do we go from here. So we've had these really great discussions about what it is that we need to pursue and those key areas. The next thing, once you've determined what some of those skills that you're going to pursue and that you'd like to develop within your workforce, whether that be emotional intelligence, agility, or whether it's a future skill set or one of the 2023 prioritized skills, is really making sure to develop your own traction plan. And this one's really, really critical. So make sure you've got that clear communication and engagement plan. Who do you need to talk to? Who needs to be aware? And think about that kind of racy style mold. So who needs to be aware? Who do you need to get on board early? And don't try to boil the ocean. Do a couple of things really, really well. If you've got 10 priorities, you might be spreading yourself a little thin and thinking about, do I do just 2 or 3 to really have a significant uplift of skill across the business? When you start that execution and delivery piece, really make sure that you're targeting your key capability and your key audience. And after the interactions that they've had and in the skill build, make sure that you're thinking about and you've addressed mindset, the skill set, and the tool set to make it really practicable. One thing that certainly I know that I've experienced in working with corporate organizations for the last 20 years is that often the orientation is very much about, we'll share the model and we'll tell you about it, but we don't then delve enough in depth in terms of how do you go about practically applying that in your team. And that can be something as simple as, how do I as a leader take this model and what do I now do with it? So it's great that you tell me about conflict management styles and approaches and who's a bear and who's a shark and these kind of bits and pieces. But how and when do I apply that? And educating leaders around what that ultimately looks like and means for them in reality and application becomes a really significantly important piece, because people want practical tools and to walk away with that toolkit that they can help them to get their next level role. And then finally, make sure it's really being embedded into different opportunities with sponsorship and engagement. Who's behind you, who's constantly demonstrating that skill or attribute, and where can that be practiced as well too. If you're thinking about developing the feedback skills of your leaders, maybe executing your plan just before end of year reviews. or instilling opportunities for leaders and creating the expectation that they give feedback of their team, but making sure that it's not a skill that they learn that won't be then utilized for a number of months is probably not high on the agenda as well. And then finally, the way forward from here, where do you ultimately go from here, is to really think about that plan for yourself, and following that pathway is about determine your needs. What do you need for your organization? Is it skill sets for now, foundational pieces for leadership, or is it some of the future proofing things? And we all know that old analogy: if you don't build a house on sand, unless you live in Dubai, of course. Is that we really want to make sure is that those solid foundations are there, and those leadership essentials are absolutely critical. How does your way forward link to your own business strategy? And what is your strategy? How does it meet the need that you've got, and why do it now? Really that thinking about why are we doing this? Why are we investing time, resources, and taking people away from their roles? Get started with your traction plan and really start to future-proof your leaders at all levels. In the group that I was with, we had some wonderful discussion with Danielle and a couple of others within our group around saying some of those middle-level leaders aren't always as privileged to be exposed to development opportunities, and that can leave them with great technical skills. However, the leadership and feedback elements are not they're not as well versed in, which can be a real challenge for you and your organization. In the interests of time, I just wanted to say, as we look to conclude the session today, just a massive thank you for everyone that came today. It's an absolute pleasure to host the conversation in the midst of school holidays. So those that have seen Paw Patrol and many other children's programming across the last little bit, and the challenge that it is in front of you, hopefully everyone's been able to take something from the conversations today. I know that I've crammed as many words as I possibly could in under 60 minutes, so probably a new land speed record for many of you. If there's anything that really resonates with you, or you'd like to discuss about how to develop your leaders, succession plan for your leaders, and put in place plans and development opportunities that really will help provide your leaders with the mindset, skill set, and tool set to be effective leaders, all the way from graduates to C-suites, we'd love to have a conversation with you from myself and all the team at Lighthouse. Thank you so much for your time. Have a lovely long weekend, whether that starts at 5 o'clock today or whether that starts at 5 o'clock tomorrow. Thank you for your time. It's been a really wonderful pleasure to meet a number of you. Thanks so much for your time, and we'll be happy to stick around and take any questions if anyone would like us to reach out in the short term.
Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.